Welcome back to another episode of That Boat Babe podcast with your favorite boat babe here, MaryAllison. In today's episode, I am going to be sharing with you a huge learning lesson that just occurred while we were offshore heading to Panama City that I wish I would have known before I would have ever left the dock. So today, you're going to learn what I wish I would have known after I had bought my boat. Something that is such a huge deal that unfortunately we almost thought this accident was irreparable. The maintenance and money that could have gone into upkeeping this part of our boat is nothing compared to what we are now facing after the damage that has been done on board. So let me start off with a recap of this past month. As some of you know, if you follow me on Instagram at That Boat Babe and now on YouTube at That Boat Babe, you know that my goal for years has been to get back down to the Caribbean by way of the Bahamas. When I was a stewardess, I lived in the Bahamas for years and I miss it. I really feel like my soul is there. That is where I belong. And we were living on Tortola before Hurricane Irma in 2016, 2017. And we had a beautiful life. We had everything planned out for the future. My job with Aristocat Charters as a captain of the World Cat, and I was also on a 49-foot privilege, just was incredible. I mean, I got to experience basically vacation life every single day. And I got to bring in the hospitality industry part of me and provide an amazing experience for people when they came down island and wanted to explore the islands. So life was amazing. After Hurricane Irma, we moved to Alabama, which has been another form of paradise. It's honestly been easier here. Living in the States is easier. It is more convenient, but with that comes, I don't know, a lack of closeness in a community. And a lot of times it's almost like we live in such a spoiled land, I guess you'll say, here in the States, that there's a little bit of an arrogance that we didn't have down island. And I've always wanted to get back there. So as you know, I went through an entire boat refit at Barber last year, and there's a huge part of the refit that I missed, and I am not beating myself up for it anymore. It was a total accident on my part that I didn't even know to maintain. I didn't even know to ask about. And while we were offshore heading to Panama City, it was a big, scary mistake. And thank goodness we made it to the Pensacola shipyard to haul out and fixed it, and everything was fine. But it could have been completely detrimental if shit were to hit the fan and stuff were to fall apart. So while I was hauled out at Barber, I had no clue what engine maintenance my maintenance guy had been doing on my engine. I just knew to pay the bill. I have been a stewardess on yachts for years, and none of my experience really included a lot of engine mechanical work. It didn't include anything with the transmission. It didn't include anything really with the driveshaft. I always hire out, after now owning this boat, I hire out for certain things because if anything goes wrong, it can go back on that company, go back on that insurance. They can come and fix it. It's just something I've always felt more comfortable with. But there are some things that I've missed that were just a huge mistake on this attempt, our first attempt to head back to Florida and the Bahamas. So a couple weeks ago, the family and I got ready. We had a departure from here at Pirates Cove. And it was pretty emotional. It's honestly really hard for me to leave paradise to go to another paradise. You know, I don't know if some of y'all know, but I've been sober for 13 years. And prior to that, usually it was like I would leave places because you burn a lot of bridges when you're drinking, or you have a lot of memories that are a little foggy. And so it's really easy to say, forget it here. I'm going to go to the next place and start over. But in sobriety, I am so happy I don't burn bridges. I form a lot of really great relationships that it's really hard to leave and to go to that next place because there's not really a reason to leave. It's like, wait, I just want to leave because I want to go explore and I want to go have a different life, not necessarily a better life. It's uncomfortable for me. So we get off the dock, it's emotional, and we make it to Fort McRae. One thing that we did though was because I had never been out the pass in Pensacola. And I know the pass has a weird wind over tide. I didn't also realize how huge that pass is when you're leaving. And we didn't really know the lay of the buoys. I know that my boat has run aground coming in the Pensacola Pass when I had hired a captain to bring her the last little leg here from Florida. When I bought her, I knew the boat had run aground. Somebody here on the beach had told me they pulled my boat off the beach. And I didn't actually know that happened, but now I did. So I was a little nervous. So what we did was we left here at Pirates Cove. We went past Fort McRae. We made a line on our chart, probably only a quarter of the way out of Fort McRae, but at least we had something because we were going to leave the following morning in the middle of the night to go offshore. So we had a line, we came back in, we calibrated the autopilot, we headed in Fort McRae, we anchored for the night, took the kids for a walk, let run around and go to the bathroom, and came back in, made dinner, and went to sleep. Well, we decided to wake up at 1:30 in the morning because from Fort McRae to Panama City, we thought it was going to take about 14 hours, and we wanted to get into Panama City before dark. So, to be honest, I was absolutely terrified. I've been offshore where you don't see land for days, but my experience was with a captain and on somebody else's price tag. So I've kind of learned that ignorance is definitely bliss when it comes to this lifestyle. It's a different animal when you own the boat, because it's your price tag. What did you forget? And I'm going to turn this around on me. It's my price tag. What have I forgotten? I also have a family on board. It's just so much more responsibility than it was in the past. So I thought I did everything right. I prepared to the best of my ability. You can only ask people how to prepare to go on an offshore adventure enough before you become incredibly overwhelmed. So the one piece of advice that I was given was, you will find what you need to fix after 10 hours of being offshore. And boy, that came true so quickly. Within probably 6 hours. No, let me think. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, about 10 hours of being offshore and leaving Fort McRae. It was a huge shock at what I missed while being hauled out in the yard prior, when I did the whole refit and the paint job and, new AC and new water heater and new electrical and so much. I missed something so huge. So while we were offshore, first of all, the wave height was a little bit more than we were comfortable with. And I was running about 2,400 RPMs. Well, no, first I was running about 2,100 RPMs, and everything seemed fine, but we weren't making a lot of headway. We had an east wind. The waves were from the east. They were about 3 to 4 feet, and it was kind of getting to the point where I'm like, I don't even know, we're not going to make it, before dark. So I decided to bump it up to 2,500 RPMs, and I'm laying there, and I hear this vibration that's driving me crazy. And one thing that you'll learn in boat ownership is that your audible intuition, your sense of hearing, your clairaudience is huge, because you can hear things that are off a lot easier than you can see them. So I come downstairs, and it's a habit. I always do an engine room check, and I always check under the floor at the driveshaft when we're underway. And I pulled up the floor to the drive shaft and I'm like, oh no, like this could be a detrimental mistake where we will sink within 15 minutes flat. I will not be able to stop this from happening if we started to take on water. I look down and the drive shaft is like, brrr, brrr, like starting to shake to the point where it's wanting to come apart. So I go back upstairs and I had to make the decision to turn around. And it was so hard because it was a Sunday. I wasn't sure if we would even have a haul out opportunity in Panama City. By the time we got there, we would also be coming in at dark. We realized the vibration would stop if I was going about 1,000 RPMs, and I was beating into the waves and almost stopping. I would go 5 knots down to 2. Finally get up to about 4 knots, go down to 2. I mean, I wasn't really moving, and it was also becoming where we couldn't do anything. I mean, we couldn't go downstairs. I couldn't even cook. I didn't meal prep. You know, that was a huge mistake. So we were pretty miserable already. So we decided to turn around. I put up the sails and we made it the best we could with what we had. The dolphins were beautiful offshore. The scary part was I didn't know what was happening with the drive shaft. We didn't have really a great way of diagnosing it. And the people we had texted, the only responses they gave us were, oh, time for a haul out. And I'm like, this is not what, I wanted. So financially, hauling out again was not in the budget. And yeah, maybe I guess it should have been, but it wasn't. And what was that haul out going to include? Because the last haul out I did lasted 6 months. So I was a little nervous. Well, I ended up falling asleep and we finally made it to the Pensacola Pass. It was so rolly, stuff was everywhere. And it was another 3 hours after the pass to get to the Pensacola shipyard because we were having to go so slow. So we anchored outside of the Pensacola shipyard. I already had hauled out there before. I knew their lift was big enough to support me and I wouldn't have to take anything apart. So we were really lucky because I'm friends with a guy named Brandon Hall and he owns Perdido Sailor out of the Pensacola shipyard. If you have a sailboat and you're in the area of the Panhandle or the Alabama coastline, he is wonderful to go to. He knows sailboats and appreciates working on them. A lot of guys in this area only work on sport fish boats with owners with an unlimited budget, which makes it very difficult if you're a sailboat owner like myself. So Brandon came down and he had diagnosed that our engine mount was broken and the other one was completely unattached and loose. In my entire career, I've never faced this issue. I've never had anybody teach me about this issue. And I guess I thought it was completely fine because my engine's not original. I had just always thought it was, I don't know. I didn't think engine mounts would come loose. And maybe that's just me. I think it's just me not having that experience in that area. Also, I've learned if you have somebody working on your boat, they might not be checking the things that you think they're going to check. Once we started diving into it, we realized I barely had any transmission fluid. It had not been checked probably in a decade. So that could have been a huge issue while we were obviously traveling to the Bahamas. And once we started diving into the drive shaft seal, we decided to just replace the hose clamps because the drive shaft was actually fine. It's a PSS drive shaft seal. And when we were replacing the hose clamps, you can choose between ABA or corrugated hose clamps. Corrugated, I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. They're sharper and they're not curved on the edges. So compared to ABA hose clamps, which are a lot more expensive, but if we had ABA hose clamps on the boat, we would not have to have hauled out. So just spending another $100 on ABA hose clamps would have saved us, $1,500 that we just had to spend in the yard. So what happened was the old corrugated hose clamp had worn through the PSS seal. So when we were underway, it was vibrating like crazy and worn through, and I think also just from wear and tear over the years, had worn through the PSS seal, and when Seth was taking it off, water started coming in the boat. So we knew right then, like, we've got to haul out, like right now. So we get into the haul out, and we had a really great haul out experience. The people at Pensacola Shipyard and Brandon and his team were wonderful. We really felt like taken care of, and since it is a smaller yard than Barber, it was less overwhelming to be there. There was a lot less hustle and bustle. The bathrooms were close. I mean, stuff like that. It was a little bit cheaper than Barber, so it was totally worth being there. But after we hauled out, we had also realized that the cutlass bearing, God only knows the last time it had been replaced. I mean, over a decade ago. And so that also had to be done. So basically, in conclusion, there were mechanical and engine issues that I had absolutely no experience with. I had no clue to look while I was in the yard at Barber at my driveshaft seal from like up close perspective. I mean, I'm always watching the driveshaft when we're underway. I've never had an issue with it. It's a dripless seal, it's fine. But once I started removing the hose clamps, I realized that's where the damage was. The vibration that I heard when I bought the boat, I honestly thought it was normal. Now that we've successfully replaced 2 of the 4 engine mounts, I realized that vibration has been going on since I bought this boat, which is such a bummer. I had no idea. And the cutlass bearing, now I know anytime I haul out, or if it's just been a couple years, go ahead and replace it. The thing with that though comes dropping the rudder and disconnecting the steering. So thankfully we had some guys with Brandon who were able to help. Seth was able to do it. I was able to help underneath the boat. And it was just a big team effort. And I realized that those projects really dated my boat because she is 40 years old. And I also realized that maybe the people that owned my boat before, they just didn't even know to look either. Or maybe they did replace those things. You know, a lot of times we hire out to do so many jobs that we realize they might not have been using the right things, like the correct hose clamps. So that is what our adventure was at Pensacola Shipyard. If you're planning on going offshore on a big adventure, check your engine mounts. Check for any vibration at all because it could be coming from your engine, most likely. Check your transmission fluid because a lot of people change their oil, but they don't check the transmission fluid. The other thing I would check the hose clamps on your seals. We actually replaced our PSS seal with a Glide Systems seal, and it's water cooled. Our PSS seal system was set up to be water cooled, but they didn't actually plumb it in. And then check your cutlass bearing because that's something that I did not do. Well, in the next episode, that one will be a continuation of what happened when we got back in the water. And this is more a test on a relationship. If you are living on board with your spouse, it is a test to double check your own work instead of trusting a professional, which sounds crazy, but to just double and triple check, especially when it comes to hose plumbing. But that will be for next week. I hope that this episode has taught you one big thing to look for when you own your boat and if you're planning to cruise, because it's not something that was taught to me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go ahead and follow me at That Boat Babe on Instagram. Let's be friends and we can chat in the DMs. Go ahead on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube podcast where I cover this entire disaster offshore and in the yard all on our YouTube channel in the most recent episode. So go ahead, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I love you so much. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you next week. Bye.